All right, good.
Oh, there you go. Yep. No, I mean, like yesterday, I hadn't, brought a specific presentation or whatever, wanted to be open to discussion. But I think there's plenty of stuff we can talk about as well, to try to share what we've been doing, some of the, things we're working on and the vision forward for interlibrary loan. But yeah, first, it'd be great to just go around since not all of us have met. Um, Michelle and I were on yesterday, but I'll just start that um, I I'm fairly new to OCLC. I started in February, right before the pandemic shut everyone down. But yeah, so my background is academic libraries. Most recently, I was at the University of Pennsylvania for 10 years and among other things, was over resource sharing. And then also earlier in my time at Penn, I managed the consortial borrowing program among the Ivy Plus libraries from Penn. So have a diverse background in resource sharing and resource management. So maybe Krista, you want to go?
Sure. My name is Krista Stark. I've been with OCLC for a lot longer than Peter has been with OCLC. But all that means is that my library background is a little more out of date. So I've worked with resource sharing for a number of years now. And before that worked with First Search and on the kind of the reference side of things, and a bit in marketing as well, way back. And then before that, I worked at a small academic library in Western Michigan, Aquinas College. And before that came from public libraries in the Chicago area. So.
But like yesterday, Jenny was on yesterday. Like yesterday, Krista brings the in-depth expertise into the systems and can answer many questions I can't. I think a little more about from that perspective of how do we serve the patron, and get the material quickly. What's it like in the library to run the software? And then Krista can actually tell you what's going on under the hood, how you fix these problems, all this really practical stuff, as opposed to just my theoretical knowledge.
I was going to ask, is there a roadmap to things that are coming with like Tapasa or WorldShare ILL? I would like to maybe suggest some, improvements. If there's not something, on there, like one thing would really help me is when I cancel a request, like to be able to tell the patron, like have a notification sent to the patron saying, this is why I'm canceling this, because it's either a duplicate request or whatever reason.
So can I ask what service you're using? Are you using Tapasa or WorldShare ILL?
And I know we used to use Iliad prior to Tapasa, and it seemed like that was an option with Iliad, as you could, as you were canceling the request, you could send a notification, saying why you were canceling it.
Yeah, I believe you can do that now. I have to double check and see if it's an automated message that gets sent to the patron or if it's one that you have to trigger manually, but I can look that up while we go through here. Are you active in the community center as well?
No, but I've been learning more about that during this, meeting. So I'm going to go check a lot of things out on there.
Yeah, because the first thing you mentioned, which was the roadmap, we do update the roadmaps in the community center every quarter. So we'll have a new update coming in January, and we kind of look at the near term, and then we have sort of a bigger bucket for longer term enhancements and changes that are coming to the system. So I'll get into the community center here and I can show you where that is if you'd like to see it real quick. And we also use the community center quite heavily for enhancement requests. So if there are things that you want, you can put those in kind of an enhancement area, and other users of Tapasa are able to vote on your request. And oftentimes people will come in and say, oh my gosh, I want that too. And the more we hear from the community, the greater weight we give something, give an enhancement request as we look through the myriad requests that come through. And we do review those on a regular basis and try and tie them back then as to either asking for more information sometimes. And also, when something does get installed into production, we'll put updates there, or if something is not planned or we have a way to work around that, we try and put that information in the community center as well. So give me just a moment and I'll jump over there.
Yeah.
I am registered for the meeting next week. So
Yeah, the TAPASA meeting. Yeah, that's great. I was curious, Michelle, do you want that ideally to be an automated thing where when you cancel, it automatically sends, or do you want to send them the notice selectively? And why I'm asking in part is I can see I've had it happen both ways. Sometimes there's a reason like a duplicate request where you're going to fill the person's request. And if you send them a notice, they might think you canceled, they didn't realize maybe they submitted to, and do you tell them or not tell them? Do you just fill the request and then, it can't quietly cancel? Or do you, but certainly sometimes there are things, you can't get, or this is a special collections item available at this library nearby. You might be able to see it on site, but we can't borrow it. So I just was curious, do you want them all to go bing with a notice, or do you want more control?
Like right now with the PASA, we have a notification that gets sent when I cancel something, but it's just a generic cancel. And there's no way for me to say, oh, I'm canceling this because it's a duplicate request. It's just a blanket automatic response when I hit cancel. I can't cancel, send a reason on demand. Like with Iliad, there was a drop down box, and when I hit cancel, it would say send response to patron now, and you could write in there duplicate request, or you could send them a note saying at that time on demand why you were canceling it.
Great. That's what I needed to know, because I didn't realize that from the initial question. So I'm not sure, but I've made a note. So, so Bill, could you introduce yourself and let us know where you work and what systems you work with?
I'm Bill Birchfield. I'm the librarian at Kentucky Historical Society, and WMS exclusively. We use it for everything, ILL and metadata and discovery, the whole 9 yards. And we have a position that used to be responsible for all the back end of WMS, but turns out it was written into my job description and it was just never handed down to me that I'm actually responsible for it. And the other person actually left, and they're filling that job, but with revised job description. And so I'm kind of dipping my toes into all the different waters. I mean, I do ILL just as the supplier, and I've done it for a long time, but I'm trying to learn some more of the back end things of all the different systems. And I'm primarily a cataloger. I mean, I do it all. I mean, that's
right.
The librarian at a small library, you do it all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And right now we don't have volunteers to take all the slack, and so I'm really doing it all. And
yeah.
My boss is running all the other stuff, and we're the only two real librarians left, and so it's an interesting time right now for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
ILL, I mean, as I was telling Michelle, I mean, a million years ago as a student, I actually, wow, even it was undergrad. I worked ILL lending side at UK, and
wow.
So I learned Iliad pretty strongly back then, and my job was actually a staffer job that they lost funding for. It was a grant funded position, they lost the funding, and so I ended up getting shoved over into that, and I was responsible for checking in all the stuff that was loaned out everywhere. I had to check it all back in and send it back to the right branches and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So ILL, I'm no stranger to, but
Yeah.
learning the back end stuff
Yeah.
is something of interest to me. Yeah, and I'm a techie anyway, so
Yeah.
that's just the fun side for me.
Yeah, I worked at a small private law school library earlier in my career, and sort of know what you mean. There were just about 5 of us on staff, and you got to do a little bit of everything, which was great. But it also, some days you had to do everything, and it could be not so great. So
Definitely.
yeah, I hear you.
I really miss the volunteers for shelving right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we are open to the public, and we have a patron in right now. We don't get a lot, but we changed our policies. We don't let the patrons browse the stacks because of quarantine. Because we quarantine items for 72 hours. We can't just sit back there and watch whatever they touch and pull it off the shelf and stuff. So we actually page, going old school, and that is interesting. Yeah, because then we quarantine it for 72 hours, and the next week we start shelving everything, and that's pretty much me.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, that just shows there's like more work you have to do than normally when the people could just access the material directly. And so you're having to do all this physical labor as well as all the technical support and everything yourself.
mhm.
Wow.
Fun time.
Yeah. Did you get to the roadmaps, Krista? Or
I did, yes.
something you want to share and we could look at?
Yeah, let me close a couple things down here.
Yeah.
Should have cleaned up my desktop before we started. Yeah, let me share my screen here. Hopefully, I'll go into the community center here first. Hopefully you can see this.
Yep, now it's on mine at least.
Okay, so a couple different things to note in the community center is there is a section here called enhancements. And if you click on that and scroll down a little bit, you can get enhancement suggestions, and you can see what other people have put in there. You can go into the detail of the description that we ask for folks to fill out, what the description is, what problem it will solve, and how you're doing it now. And then when you are logged in, you are able to vote for these things, and you can review it, give it a certain number of stars, add additional commentary, and so forth. You can also go back here one second. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. We recently had a redesign of the community center, so it's easier to use, but everything's in a different place than I expect it to be. So you can submit a suggestion and give it a title, and it will kind of walk you through the process. And this is kind of our go-to resource for looking for enhancement suggestions and hearing from the community. So I really recommend that you take a look at that sometime. And that's a great place to submit your suggestions to us.
Is there a search, Krista? So like, say Michelle had this cancel issue that, she'd like addressed. And so
here at the top.
Okay, there it is.
In this gray bar, it's probably really hard to read on the screen, but it says search enhancement suggestions with a little magnifying glass to the right. And you can search for printing or cancel or any keywords that might be useful that you want to see what's in there.
Or email patron or something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you can, at the top, you can look at your suggestions. So you can go back to your enhancement requests and not have to scroll through or search for and try and remember what you put in there before. Take a look at how you've rated things, and also get a view of what's been recently installed.
And just one other thing, like And then where would, like, say I'm doing this, would I want to check that there isn't a way, like documentation or something about cancel before I go in to suggest an enhancement? Like,
Yes.
I actually, this is where I would need to go and search to see, does it actually do this? Because I haven't done the configuration of the system.
Right. Well, and I'll say that if you don't want to go and do that digging, you can put an enhancement suggestion. And if we look at it and we're like, oh, we do that, we'll respond with that as well. So you don't have to spend time looking if you don't want to. And if you call, if you call support for something and they are very light and you want to put an enhancement suggestion, they can help you figure out if we have it first as well. And then point you to the community center to get more input. On the right side, this is the TPASA landing page within the community center. And on the right side here, there are popular links. And this is where we have all of our documentation, information about implementation, which you've gone through, training, release notes as well. So we put those out usually shortly before the release. We have a release coming next weekend on the 13th. I think it's the 13th, Sunday. So there'll be release notes that are posted later. I'll get my weeks confused here. Sometime next week, release notes should be posted in the community center. And then the roadmap, which is kind of where we started the whole conversation.
Yeah.
You can take a look here, and we've put the WorldShare Interlibrary Loan and TPASA roadmaps together. A lot of the information is applicable to both services, but then we call out what is specific to TPASA. So this is what was just released before our October release. This is what's coming from October through December. And then we go out a couple more releases. Like I said, we'll be updating this in January.
And just, yeah, so it'll be updating soon. That ISO 18626, which basically don't feel bad if that means nothing to you. It's basically a standard that runs in the background and allows us to talk to other systems, more like how HTML renders on a web page, or you know, it's just a standard industry tech standard, and it's something that will allow us to better integrate with other resource sharing systems. And so it's important, and to some people that use different systems, like maybe DocLine or something like that, is one we're looking at as an integration point that's for medical libraries. You know, people that are into that will be like, oh, great, this is super important. But for a lot of people that look at the roadmap, that means nothing. And but yeah, it's on there. One of the things I guess I'll call out is the turnaround time improvement for automated requests. This has been a really huge focus for us this year, is making sure that you get material quickly when you request it on interlibrary loan. And, you know, I know from historical days, and, you know, I'm not sure how long you've been doing ILL, Michelle, but Bill said, you know, he's been at it for a number of years. In the past, there was sort of a sense of, I'm going to submit this request, I have no idea when it will arrive. You know, you can see these libraries own it, but is it available? You know, are they going to respond quickly? It was really hard to predict. And so two key things that we actually have already started to roll out. One of them is shelf status availability, or real-time availability, which basically means when the request goes out, before it drops into your lending queue or area where you're going to look at the request and see if you can supply, we are starting to do a lookup against the the catalog to see, and we were talking about this, Michelle, yesterday, but we're checking your catalog to see if the item is available. So if somebody has checked it out, we're going to just move that request on past your library so that it doesn't sit at your library until you get around to logging in, and then you look in WMS and you're like, oh, this is checked out. I guess I need to say no. So we're just moving that request right on to a library that has an available copy. And like I mentioned yesterday, there's about 500 libraries that we've configured so far for this, and we're scaling that up across the network. So we're seeing definite like improvement in turnaround time based on that, because it doesn't have to sit around waiting for someone to reply if the item's checked out. And then another thing that this mentions automated requests. We have some libraries already testing, like over 100 libraries already testing what we're calling either smart lender strings, or the long mouthful is turnaround time sorted lender strings, which basically all it is we know from historical data how long it takes a library to respond to a request. Some libraries keep up right on top of it. Maybe they have designated staff for ILL, so they're looking at it all day, processing twice a day. We know those libraries are quick. And then there are other libraries that, and like Bill, maybe there's some days you don't get to check ILL because you've got, 5 other things that are ahead of it. And so we know from historical data, the average time it takes each library to respond. And so when you use this new feature, which is only in automation because automation has to build the lending string, but you send the request through automation, it looks at who owns this item, and then it sorts the lenders by the fastest first, and then the next fastest. It also, our automations also look at like deflections. They avoid libraries that are deflecting because maybe this is a video and libraries are deflecting video requests or something. So it looks at deflections, it looks at some other things, but then once it knows these are the libraries I want to go to, it makes sure it puts them in the order so that, the fastest supplier, the one who's most likely to be able to fill that quickly for you, is first. And we have just, some people, when we first started talking about this, they were like, oh no, whoever's fastest is going to get every single request. Well, we have accounted for that as well, and we are able to balance that load. And when we looked at the data, it really is like you have a big group of libraries that are pretty close, like they all respond within, like 8 or 12 hours usually, or they have a really high average. And so those, we can sort of balance between those and then keep going out in tiers. And so, that's why we are starting that slowly though, with, testing with a little over 100 libraries just to make sure the load balancing of requests is working right and we aren't overwhelming anyone. But that's something I think with our February release, we plan to turn on for all libraries. So anyone who builds a lender string through the automation, that will be one of the things it looks at, is who can supply this the fastest and helps bring that distribution to it.
I think one of the most frustrating things for me is when an item just sits there in somebody's queue until it times out. No one ever looks at it, no one ever touches it, and it's sat there all that time. And I would like to have the power that when I see that happening, that I can somehow force that request to go to the next lender.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we know there are some suppliers that are just not very responsive, and it's difficult for someone like you to be able to, or anyone out there, to keep track of who's good, who's bad.
Yeah.
You can do that within your local network or, your area, but once you start going out to libraries across the country, it's hard to know who's good and who's not. And that's why this can do that for you. I mean, if it's sitting in the queue expiring, it's likely that happens at that library more than just for your single request. And we would pick that up because the data would show that library is slow because they're letting requests expire, and we'd only use them as a last resort.
I frequently, when I notice that happening, I'll send an email, to that library and say, could you just say no? And sometimes I don't even get a response to the email.
Right.
So it's
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging because there are, not to pick on you, Bill, but there are libraries that have very unique collections, and you want to go to them when they're the source, that historical information that you can't get other places. But maybe they also have this, general interest book that happened to be purchased at one time because it fit a collection profile or happened to talk about the area or for whatever reason. And so this is a way that we can make sure we keep those libraries that are unique, but are going to be slower just because that's not their highest priority. But we also make sure the requests are going to the ones that really have the capacity to fill interlibrary loan requests and are on top of it. So I think this will actually help be a good step in the direction of what you're talking about, Michelle. But maybe we do need to think about, are there other ways that you can intervene if you see that, like you're saying? Because there's sort of two sides of the coin. Are they working on it? Is it like when I was at Penn, we had departmental libraries that were small and had very unique collections. And sometimes when we would go to them to fill a request, it would take a lot longer than most of the requests that came to us because, most stuff we could fill pretty quick centrally with our main operation, but maybe the museum library, they only had like 3 staff members. And if someone was sick or whatever, you could have things taking a lot longer. And so one of the balancing acts, I guess, that I go through in my mind is, would I want you to go and say, boom, I'm taking this request away from me and I finally get it back get the thing to supply from the medical or the museum library. And I'm like, oh no, where'd the request go? I thought I had another day. But it's those balancing acts. It's because
if people would use the considering
yes, exactly.
option, then that would alleviate that, but not all libraries do. And it's right there. You're considering, and that at least lets people know that you're actually working on something.
That's true.
That's something even here. I'll be honest, with us being a research library, most of our stuff doesn't leave, and if it's over 100 pages, we don't have the staff time to copy. And so that's kind of our hard limit is 100 pages. But if it's right at the borderline, and we might consider binding up a circulating copy of something that we're the only library that holds it, or something like that, then I'll mark it considering, and let people know that we're going through a process and we're going to make a decision on whether we're going to spend that extra time. And because then we're going to have to val bind it up, and we're going to have to process it, put it in the circulation system, and the whole 9 yards. That's going to take a whole lot more time, especially with me being the one that's going to be copying it and binding it up and adding it in WMS and doing all the shelf prep. I mean, I'm going to have to do everything on it, and so it's going to take me more than just a couple of days to make that kind of decision. I always will say, considering if we're going through that kind of process.
That's great.
And if every library would do that, then that would solve a whole lot of problems out there. But not everybody does.
Right.
And on the same note, that corresponds to your days to respond. Because if you're working on it, that request can move on. If it's marked considering, it can still move on automatically if it doesn't get submitted.
Yeah.
Respond yes within your days to respond. So, but what I was finding was people were just leaving it submitted, not looking at it. It was timing out, and even though their days were set to respond to 4 days, it seemed like it was still staying in the queue with them longer than those 4 days.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be, and I mean, I don't know, Krista, does the days to respond are probably only weekdays, right?
Yeah, they're only business days and they're only in the US. And I know we've had some conversations pretty recently about, do we need to revisit that decision since, we stop aging on holidays. Well, the holidays are very Western. And so maybe we need to not do that. And other institutions have said, I have a slew of students in on Saturdays or on Sundays, and I want to be able to process the requests and go ahead and age them. So we've just started having some conversations about how do we handle that? Do we manage that by letting libraries say, what are my work days, and maybe allowing them to extend it beyond the typical Monday through Friday aging days, so that they can say, Saturday is a work day for me. Yes.
Tuesday through Saturday. We're not open on Mondays.
Oh, interesting.
Oh,
And so that I say yes, absolutely, because we've had things time out and go then that we would have been willing to supply.
right.
Just we didn't get to it in time because it timed out on us. And I'm like, well, okay.
Well, and something else that we plan to implement in the next few months is the ability. So right now, when you see a list of requests, you have the date the referral date, which is essentially the last date that the request was actioned on or touched. And we're going to be changing how that displays to show how much time you have left. So if it comes in and you have 4 days, then you have 3 days and 2 days. And even with the ability to order and say, what do I have 12 hours or less left on? So I know that if I want to respond, I have to do it in this particular workday. So doesn't solve this problem necessarily, but it might be a stepping stone to helping people see what is most important or most timely that needs their attention.
Yeah.
So when you take advantage of the scheduling option in policies directory, does that work with the days to respond at all, or?
So in the policies directory, there is a way to set what your days to respond are. That does not really intersect with the days that you have marked as necessarily out of office, or if you're closed for the duration, other than the ability to set you as a non-supplier. Right. So if you're going to be shut down for a week over the holidays, or 2 weeks, whatever, we're able to set that piece feeds in very nicely, the non-supplier, but the actual just schedule of openings doesn't at this point. And that's one of the things we've looked at is if we go down the path of letting libraries say what are their work days, where do we do that? And the policies directory seems the most logical place right now, because we don't need yet another place that people have to go to put something that shares similar information. So.
But yeah, that what Krista was talking about of how long do you have to respond would be a perfect scenario. Would be Bill's looking at that on Saturday, and you're not going to be open on Monday, and anything that was 24 hours or something like that is going to expire on Monday, 24 hours or less. So
yeah, and that's where it's come in, and just not noticing that it's getting ready to expire.
Right.
Yeah,
so
you log in and you finally get a chance at the end of the day on Saturday. All the patrons finally get out. And, like I say, we're paging things right now, and so we're our workload, and so we don't always get to it. And so it finally gets down to where we can actually check it. And I say we, it's me. I can finally take a couple of minutes and I see, and I'm like, well, okay, I can deal with that on Tuesday. Well, no, it goes away on Monday, and I don't even notice it. And Tuesday I come in, I'm like, it's gone. And I'm like, okay.
Right. You've gone to all the trouble of like making the copy or something. Yeah. That's,
And you have to do sort of mental math gymnastics to figure out, okay, the referral date and the aging dates, and it's a weekend, and
Yeah.
sort of,
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, having a little bit easier visual cue that it's getting ready to expire, that would be awesome for me.
yeah. So look for that coming. I can't remember if that's maybe February or April right now.
Cool.
And it's something that we added, I think, relatively recently. So look, as I look at the roadmap that's up here, it looks like it's January through March. So probably a little bit closer to March to April. So.
Okay.
So another question about the libraries that are participating in the automatic respond no. Would it be possible to do a profile group for those libraries? So will you make sure you're requesting materials from those people?
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, on the one hand, it would be possible. I was trying to think, if there were any implications, like, I guess the way it's working right now, it's libraries that already had availability configured with OCLC because they were WMS or they used Discovery or something. The one sort of worry I guess I'd have is some libraries might be like, hey, I want this. You haven't got around to configuring me yet. Now you're avoiding me because, and it's not my fault. I'm ready to get set up. So, I can see some potential for people that we haven't been able to get to yet, just because it is sort of a manual process to get each library set up, and we are working on it. So I would worry that people would think some people would think we were, I don't know.
Exclusionary.
Yeah, thank you, something like that. But it is an interesting point, because we do want to, we have some ideas of how we want to use profile groups to connect fast suppliers. And so we have some ideas that we're going to be rolling out this next year about how we can bring together fast suppliers. Because like I was talking about the data before, we can organize lender strings, but what we're finding right now is there's a high demand for electronic article delivery right now. And so can we bring together fast suppliers into a profile group and actually have that leverage, so you're getting really fast suppliers? And so we're working on a program to do that. It's still sort of in our heads right now, but
If in
yeah,
your heads, I do have a suggestion.
yeah,
Look at mesh network.
mesh network.
Yeah, and examine the faster lenders and where they're supplying regionally. And you can look at the mesh networking of that, and that might help with your optimization. I'm a techie.
Right. So I'm familiar with mesh networks in relation to like optimizing the wireless network in my home.
No, think about it in terms of you got a library and spokes on a wheel out to other libraries, and how they supply and how they interconnect with each other. That's the mesh. It's how all these different libraries interconnect with each other.
Right.
And so basically, just like take a fast library and it's in a circle, and look at all the different libraries that it supplies to regionally, and then maybe some of the other fast libraries that connect with it, and see how they mesh in the interconnections. And you might be able to optimize. This library should handle the supplying for this region of libraries on request. And then of course you're going to have crossover because that library may not have a particular holding or whatever the case.
Right.
Is. But you can use that in your search engine optimizations, looking at how the meshes interact with each other and optimize regionally how the faster suppliers can cookie cutter to their region.
So I understand and can really see how that would be important for sharing physical material because region has
Well, yeah.
a lot of bearing on how quickly you get something. For scanning and delivering articles, book chapters, yeah, we had been thinking more, is there something we can do with time zone? So cascading west, so to speak,
Mhm.
as you go so that you don't send the request at 5 o'clock on the East Coast to a library on the East Coast, you send it to a library on the West Coast
Right.
at 5 o'clock, or maybe you send it to somewhere in Europe or Japan or, depending. But you try to you take into account time zones.
Mhm.
But I do think that the description of the mesh network would be a
For physical items, I think that would be good.
yeah, to
Maybe you have
optimize.
2 different SEOs. One for article exchange, where it's looking at time zone to where you can actually still get it supplied that day potentially, versus physical item loan. Then go with the mesh idea.
Right. No, and I like that because I've been thinking about geography and how do we bring that in, but hadn't really had a good way to sort of visualize it. And I think the way you describe actually does make a lot of sense. Like who's supplying in a given region, and
I mean, it's basic network stuff. I mean, much like your home mesh network,
yeah,
but the conceptualization and the visualization in your head, you have to think more of a wagon wheel type thing, because you don't have to worry about 3-dimensional like you potentially do at the house.
right.
It's a 2-dimensional thing, and how far out are they supplying and how quickly are they getting and all that. And so, but it's still a mesh,
Yeah.
and how they interact with each other. And I think you can really get some optimization going on the physical items.
Right. Now I'm gonna ponder that one this weekend.
Can I ask another question about profile groups?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a way to like search by multiple profile groups. So like say I want to sort at my holdings list to Elvis libraries, but then I want to sort by the BCOV profile group or, something like that. That would be very helpful.
I agree 100%. And unfortunately, we don't have that capability right now. The only way, and this is that I can think of to do this, and I'll say easily with air quotes around it, is to get an export or get a list of all of the Elvis libraries and a list of all of, for example, libraries in Kentucky, and do stick them into Excel and do what's called a VLOOKUP to deduplicate the lists, which isn't, I mean, it's more work than it should be. I agree. I think it would be really lovely to have that in the policies directory. And there are many times when I've searched in the policies directory myself and I've thought, oh, I want to be able to limit by certain things, and I just can't without the extra machinations outside of the policies directory. So definitely take that back as an enhancement request if we take a look at how we can enhance the policies directory going forward. But yes.
So you won't, just so I'm walk away with the clear understanding. So you don't necessarily want to request from all the Kentucky libraries because they're not all in Elvis. So you want like a subset, right? So you can't order them, and that you can't do Kentucky and then Elvis because you'll get some charge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like when I'm in Tapasa and I'm selecting my holdings libraries that I want to put in my lender stream, I sort like the 400 libraries that come up by Elvis. And then I would like to sort those by, okay, which ones of these are supplying print materials?
Oh,
Mhm.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, another really good example.
So, and also I see on here that on the roadmap is being able to configure your expiration period for article exchange. I think that's fantastic. Because I just
Oh, good.
had a situation where a professor waited past the 30 days to retrieve his item, and then it was like, 31 days or something. He missed it by a day. And so then I had to request the item all over again, and he still hasn't gotten it.
oh no.
So it's just, I even requested it from the same library that I originally did.
Oh, wow.
It's still taking forever. I even emailed them. But
You think they'd still
It's
have the
like-
scan handy?
yeah, exactly. Well, we're getting kicked out in 44
Yeah.
It's like a,
But it was really fun talking to you. Nice to meet you, Bill
yeah, nice to meet you both.
and Michelle. It's
Yes,
been
you all
fun.
too. Thank you all so much for this helpful information.
Yeah.
And I'll follow up with some of the, we didn't get to talk about the canceling requests in that notification, but I'll follow up with you, and I've got a couple screenshots that might help, and it won't solve the problem, but it might make sure that you see what your options are, at least with it from within the interface now.
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
For coming. I know this was really helpful for me, so I hope you all feel the same way. I'm of the opinion that this is something we should continue. So hopefully you all feel the same way. And how do we feel about the frequency? So this time we waited a year in between. We did every other year basically. Is that something we want to continue, or is that something we'd rather do every year, or how does that work? Those are some questions that I have. And go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to ask if maybe are we going to send out a survey afterwards
That would be a good
to
idea.
make this easier?
Yeah,
perhaps?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. To get more accurate feedback. I think what last time we just did we do a survey too? But we may have, and then we had the session, at KLA as well.
Well, and I have a slight thought you might want to include on the survey.
Mhm.
Maybe every other year and in person, the first year we were in Lexington, do an every other year somewhere in the state, but maybe in the non-in-person year, we do maybe something like what we're doing here, maybe not for a 2-day, maybe for just a 1-day.
Yeah.
Because then that might let us, touch on some issues that are happening in the short term.
Yeah.
Plus, sometimes people can't travel or whatever, and it's easier to get together this way. I will say that's the one thing of COVID that we've found out, stuff that we've always wanted to do but weren't sure how to do it. COVID has taught us how to do it.
That's a good point, John. And I mentioned to a couple people today and yesterday that when I was taking the lead on the 2018 meeting, I got feedback from a couple of our institutions here in Kentucky that I have no travel budget. I'm the only person in the building. For various reasons, I cannot go to a face-to-face meeting. But this format, opens it up to some people who would not be able to attend. So I would like to see us continue on some regular basis in this format, even once we are able to get face-to-face again.
Right.
Safely.
That just means no sandwiches though, so no donuts. So does anybody have any feedback or any questions lingering, anything that we need to discuss before we can just go our merry way?
I just want to publicly thank OCLC for committing, their representatives for spending 2 mornings with us. Is very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for inviting
Thank you
us.
so much. We were so pleased to be here and to be included. So it means so much that we were able to hear your feedback and participate in your discussions. And Brandy worked really closely with me to make sure that we had the OCLC people that we needed for all of the different breakouts. So Brandy, thank you so much for working with me on that. I really, really appreciate it.
Big shout out to Brandy in general for handling all of this. This is really amazing.
Yes.
Thank you. And I did not do it alone. I had a team. So
You did most of it. You corralled us.
all right. Well, thank you all for that. So anything else before we go? I second that. Thank you so much to OCLC. It's really helpful to have you all here. You know, we'll be sending out a survey here in a little bit and hopefully have the recordings up. So to the mods, I sent you an invite to drop things in a Google folder, so you should have gotten that. If not, let me know and I'll add you, or if that didn't work for some reason. So I'll send an email out to all of the attendees to let you know when the recordings are available. All right. See you all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.